Queen Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, 1828 to 1858, is one of India's most celebrated historical figures. Known for her courage, leadership, and fierce resistance against British colonial rule, she became an enduring symbol of India's struggle for independence. Her life, though short, was marked by dramatic events that would forever carve her name in the annals of history as a warrior queen and a national heroine. Early life and background. Rani Lakshmibai was born on November 19, 1828, in Varanasi, then called Kashi, as Manikarnika Tambe, into a Marathi family of the Brahmin caste. Her father, Moropant Tambe, was an official in the Maratha kingdom of Bithar, and her mother, Bhagirathi Bai, was from a noble family. Growing up in a progressive environment, she received an education that was not limited by the gender norms of the time. She was taught various skills, including horse riding, archery, sword fighting, and other martial arts, skills that would later play a significant role in her legacy as a warrior queen. At the age of 14, Manikarnika was married to Raja Gangadhar Rao of Jhansi in 1842, and after the marriage, she was given the name Lakshmibai. Jhansi, a princely state in northern India, was one of the most important regions under Maratha rule. Raja Gangadhar Rao was a benevolent and just ruler, and their marriage was said to have been one of love and mutual respect. Together, they ruled over the kingdom with wisdom and fairness, and Lakshmibai began to show her leadership qualities in the administration of the state. The birth of the Rani's son and tragedy. Lakshmibai and Raja Gangadhar had one son, who was born in 1851. However, the child died shortly after birth, leading to the first major tragedy in their lives. The death of the child was a devastating blow to the royal family, as the king did not have any direct heirs. As per custom and Maratha law, the king adopted a young boy named Damodar Rao as his heir in 1853, hoping to secure the future of the kingdom. However, this adoption became the source of great conflict when the British East India Company intervened. The doctrine of lapse and the British challenge. In 1853, after the death of Raja Gangadhar Rao, the British East India Company, which was consolidating its control over India, invoked the controversial doctrine of lapse, a policy under which the British would annex Indian states that did not have a direct male heir. The British rejected the adoption of Damodar Rao, declaring the throne of Jhansi to be vacant and preparing to annex the kingdom. This act was seen as a grave injustice by Lakshmibai and the people of Jhansi. The British officers, particularly Lord Dalhousie, who was the British Governor-General of India, used the doctrine of lapse to justify the annexation of many small princely states, including Jhansi. For Lakshmibai, this was an affront to her sovereignty and a direct attack on her kingdom. She began to rally her people against the British, refusing to accept their decision and seeking to preserve the independence of Jhansi. The Rebellion of 1857. The year 1857 marked the beginning of the Indian Rebellion, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny or the First War of Indian Independence. The rebellion began as a revolt among Indian soldiers, sepoys, in the British Army, but it quickly spread to various parts of the country. In many regions, Indian rulers and their subjects rose up against British oppression, and Lakshmibai became a key figure in the resistance. When the rebellion reached Jhansi in 1857, Lakshmibai led her troops in defiance of the British. Her leadership was crucial in mobilizing the people of Jhansi to fight back. She had already proved herself to be an astute military strategist and an able administrator, and now, as the crisis deepened, she proved to be a fearless warrior. The British forces, under the command of Sir Hugh Rose, began to march toward Jhansi to quell the rebellion. Lakshmibai, who had gathered a large army of soldiers, including women and children, prepared to defend the fort of Jhansi. The fort, which had been strategically fortified, became the center of resistance. The Rani and her army fought valiantly, and the battle for Jhansi raged on for weeks. The Siege of Jhansi. The British forces laid siege to Jhansi in March 1858. Lakshmibai, despite facing overwhelming odds, continued to lead her soldiers in a determined defense of the city. Her courage and leadership inspired the people of Jhansi to fight with unmatched valor. It is said that she fought alongside her troops on horseback, wielding a sword, and even led charges against the British forces. However, despite her best efforts, the British forces eventually breached the walls of the Jhansi fort, and the Rani was forced to retreat. Before leaving the city, Lakshmibai ensured that her people were safely evacuated, and she ordered the destruction of any strategic military resources to prevent them from falling into British hands. She then fled with her army and joined other rebel forces in the region. The Battle of Gwalior and death. Lakshmibai's resistance did not end with the fall of Jhansi. She regrouped with other rebels, including the forces of Tansia Tope, and began planning a new campaign to regain control of key territories. One of the most notable events in this phase of her resistance was the Battle of Gwalior, where Lakshmibai, along with her allies, attempted to reclaim the fort of Gwalior, a significant strategic location. In June 1858, during the battle, Lakshmibai led a daring charge, but the rebel forces were ultimately defeated by the British. She was forced to retreat once again, and in the process, she was fatally wounded. On June 18, 1858, Rani Lakshmibai died on the battlefield near the town of Kota Ki Sarai in Gwalior. Her body was cremated, and she was mourned by the people of Jhansi and those who had fought beside her. Legacy and symbol of resistance. Rani Lakshmibai's legacy has remained a symbol of bravery, resistance, and patriotism. Though the British eventually suppressed the rebellion of 1857, the Rani's heroic fight against colonial rule continued to inspire generations of Indians. She became a symbol of female empowerment and a champion of Indian sovereignty. In the years following her death, Lakshmibai was immortalized in literature, art, and folklore as a fearless warrior queen who fought for her people and her kingdom. Her story has been told and retold in countless books, films, and plays, and she remains one of the most revered figures in Indian history. Lakshmibai's contributions to the independence struggle were not only as a military leader, but also as a symbol of resistance to British colonialism. Her courage and determination continue to inspire those who fight against oppression, and she is remembered as a role model for women in leadership roles, particularly in the context of Indian history. Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi's life may have been brief, but it was filled with moments of extraordinary valor and leadership. She remains a beacon of courage, and her legacy continues to influence India's path toward freedom. Queen Nefertiti of Egypt, whose name means "the beautiful one has come," is one of the most fascinating and enigmatic figures of ancient history. She lived during the 14th century BCE in the New Kingdom period, during the reign of her husband, Pharaoh Akhenaten. Renowned for her beauty, which has been immortalized through her iconic limestone bust, Nefertiti was much more than a queen of striking appearance. She was a powerful political and religious figure who played a pivotal role in one of ancient Egypt's most transformative and controversial periods. Early life and marriage to Akhenaten. Nefertiti's origins remain shrouded in mystery. Scholars debate whether she was of Egyptian descent or a foreign princess, possibly from Mitanni, a kingdom in modern-day Syria. Some theories suggest she was the daughter of a high-ranking official named A, who later became pharaoh. Despite the uncertainty surrounding her background, Nefertiti's life became intertwined with Egypt's royal family when she married Amenhotep IV, later known as Akhenaten. As queen, Nefertiti stood beside Akhenaten during one of the most radical shifts in ancient Egyptian history. Akhenaten broke away from the traditional polytheistic worship of Egypt to promote Atenism, a monotheistic or henotheistic religion centered on Aten, the sun disk. This religious revolution disrupted centuries of tradition and consolidated religious and political power under the royal family. Nefertiti as queen and religious reformer. Nefertiti's role in the Amarna period, the era named after the new capital city, Akhetaten, modern-day Amarna, founded by Akhenaten, was unparalleled. She was not just a consort but a co-regent, sharing power with her husband in ways that were unusual for queens of her time. Artistic depictions show her in roles typically reserved for pharaohs, such as smiting enemies and worshipping Aten alongside Akhenaten. This iconography suggests that Nefertiti held an extraordinary level of influence and authority. Nefertiti and Akhenaten worked together to establish Aten as the supreme deity, displacing the traditional gods of Egypt, including Amun, whose priesthood wielded significant power. This religious upheaval involved closing temples, redirecting resources to Aten's worship, and reshaping Egyptian art and culture. Nefertiti was often depicted as an equal partner in these reforms, participating in public ceremonies and rituals central to the new religion. Family life and iconography. Nefertiti and Akhenaten had 6 known daughters: Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankhsenpaten, later Ankhesenamun, Neferneferuaten, Tasherit, Neferneferer, and Setepener. These daughters were prominently featured in artistic representations, reflecting the royal family's emphasis on Aten's divine blessings. Despite the absence of sons in surviving records, Nefertiti and Akhenaten portrayed their family life as idyllic and intimate, a significant departure from traditional Egyptian royal depictions. Art from the Amarna period is remarkable for its unique style, emphasizing naturalism and individuality. Nefertiti's image, particularly the iconic limestone bust discovered in 1912 by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt, remains a symbol of beauty and elegance. The bust, with its elongated neck, almond-shaped eyes, and vibrant blue crown, has captivated the world and become one of ancient Egypt's most recognized artifacts. The mysterious disappearance of Nefertiti. The latter part of Nefertiti's life is veiled in mystery, fueling speculation and debate among historians. Around the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, Nefertiti seemingly disappeared from the historical record. Various theories attempt to explain her absence. Death. Nefertiti may have died during Akhenaten's reign, perhaps from natural causes or complications related to childbirth. The death of her second daughter, Meketaten, around the same time, has led to speculation that the two events might be connected. Change of role. Some scholars believe Nefertiti assumed a new identity as a co-regent, possibly under the name Neferneferuaten or even Smenkare. If this theory is true, she may have continued to rule alongside or after Akhenaten under a different name, potentially serving as a transitional figure before Tutankhamun's reign. Political fallout. The religious reforms initiated by Akhenaten and Nefertiti faced significant resistance, especially from the priesthood of Amun. It's possible that Nefertiti fell out of favor or was sidelined due to political unrest or changes in royal policy. After Akhenaten, the Amarna legacy. After Akhenaten's death, Egypt underwent a period of turmoil. The Aten-centric religion was abandoned, and traditional polytheism was restored. The city of Akhetaten was deserted, and the memory of Akhenaten and his reforms was systematically erased from official records, a practice known as damnatio memoriae. The fate of Nefertiti's remains is another enduring mystery. Her tomb has never been conclusively identified, though some speculate it lies in the Valley of the Kings or near Akhetaten. In 2015, archaeologist Nicholas Reeves proposed that a hidden chamber in Tutankhamun's tomb might be Nefertiti's final resting place, but this theory remains unproven. Legacy and modern perception. Despite her mysterious disappearance, Nefertiti's legacy endures. She has come to symbolize not only physical beauty but also political power and influence. Her prominent role in Akhenaten's reign and the radical changes of the Amarna period highlight her importance in one of Egypt's most transformative eras. Nefertiti's life and legacy have inspired countless works of art, literature, and scholarly inquiry. Her bust, housed in the Neues Museum in Berlin, has become a global icon of ancient Egyptian civilization. It serves as a reminder of her status as a queen who stood at the intersection of beauty, power, and cultural revolution. Conclusion. Nefertiti's life, though steeped in mystery, offers a glimpse into a period of extraordinary change in ancient Egypt. As a queen, religious leader, and cultural icon, she was instrumental in shaping the legacy of the Amarna period. Her story, blending historical fact and myth, continues to captivate and inspire, underscoring her timeless allure and enduring significance in the annals of history. Empress Elizabeth of Austria, affectionately known as Sisi, was one of the most fascinating and enigmatic figures of 19th-century European royalty. Born into a Bavarian ducal family, she became the Empress of Austria and later the Queen of Hungary, through her marriage to Emperor Franz Joseph I. Her life was marked by beauty, personal tragedy, and a restless spirit, making her a subject of enduring fascination. Early life. Elizabeth was born on December 24, 1837, in Munich, Bavaria, to Duke Maximilian Joseph of Bavaria and Princess Ludovica of Bavaria. She was the fourth of 10 children in a family known for its informal and free-spirited lifestyle. Raised in Possenhofen Castle, Elizabeth enjoyed a carefree childhood, exploring the natural beauty of Bavaria, riding horses, and engaging in outdoor activities. This early freedom shaped her love for nature and her aversion to the rigid formality of court life. Nicknamed Sisi, Elizabeth was known for her charm, wit, and beauty from a young age. She was less prepared, however, for the demands of royal life, as her family did not expect her to marry into the Austrian imperial family. Marriage to Franz Joseph. Elizabeth's life took a dramatic turn in 1853, when she accompanied her mother and elder sister, Helene, to the Austrian court at Bad Ischl. Helene was intended to marry Emperor Franz Joseph I, but upon meeting Elizabeth, the 23-year-old emperor fell deeply in love with the 15-year-old Sisi. Despite initial resistance from his domineering mother, Archduchess Sophie, Franz Joseph insisted on marrying Elizabeth. The couple wed on April 24, 1854, in a grand ceremony in Vienna. At just 16 years old, Elizabeth became the Empress of Austria, thrust into a world of rigid court protocol and political intrigue. The young empress struggled to adapt to the formalities of Habsburg court life and the expectations placed upon her as the wife of one of Europe's most powerful monarchs. Struggles at court. Elizabeth's early years as empress were fraught with challenges. She faced relentless scrutiny from the court, led by her controlling mother-in-law, Archduchess Sophie. Sophie often interfered in Elizabeth's personal life, even taking charge of the upbringing of Elizabeth's children. This strained relationship contributed to Elizabeth's feelings of isolation and discontent. Her first 2 daughters, Sophie and Gisela, were largely raised under Archduchess Sophie's supervision. The death of her firstborn, Sophie, in 1857, during a trip to Hungary deeply affected Elizabeth and marked the beginning of her struggles with mental and physical health. A restless spirit and Hungarian affinity. As Elizabeth grew older, she became increasingly restless and dissatisfied with her life at court. She developed a passion for travel, often escaping Vienna to visit other parts of Europe, including Hungary, Greece, and the Mediterranean. These travels allowed her to avoid the stifling atmosphere of the Habsburg court and to indulge her love for poetry, nature, and culture. Hungary held a special place in Elizabeth's heart. She admired Hungarian culture, learned the language, and advocated for the Hungarian cause within the Habsburg Empire. Her efforts helped facilitate the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867, which granted Hungary equal status with Austria in the newly established Austro-Hungarian Empire. Elizabeth was crowned Queen of Hungary alongside Franz Joseph in a ceremony in Budapest, solidifying her bond with the Hungarian people. Beauty and obsession with appearance. Elizabeth was renowned for her beauty, which she maintained with an almost obsessive dedication. She followed rigorous beauty regimens, including elaborate hair care routines for her famous ankle-length hair, and strict diets to preserve her slender figure. She was an early advocate of fitness, practicing gymnastics and horseback riding regularly, which was unconventional for women of her time. Her beauty became a defining aspect of her identity, but it also came at a cost. Elizabeth's self-imposed standards and relentless pursuit of physical perfection reflected deeper insecurities and a desire to control some aspect of her life in the face of court constraints and personal tragedies. Personal tragedies. Tragedy was a recurring theme in Elizabeth's life. In addition to losing her firstborn daughter, she endured the loss of her only son, Crown Prince Rudolph, in 1889. Rudolph's death in the Meiling incident, an apparent murder-suicide with his mistress, Baroness Mary Wetzera, devastated Elizabeth and Franz Joseph. The tragedy further strained their already distant relationship and plunged Elizabeth into profound grief. Elizabeth withdrew even more from court life following Rudolph's death, spending much of her time traveling incognito under the name Countess of Hohenems. She avoided public appearances and became increasingly reclusive. Assassination and death. Elizabeth's life came to a tragic and violent end on September 10, 1898, in Geneva, Switzerland. While walking along the shore of Lake Geneva, she was assassinated by Luigi Lucchini, an Italian anarchist who sought to make a political statement by killing a member of royalty. Elizabeth was stabbed in the chest with a sharpened file and died shortly thereafter. Her death shocked Europe and underscored the vulnerability of even the most powerful figures. Legacy. Empress Elizabeth's legacy is multifaceted. She is remembered as a tragic figure who sought freedom in a world that constrained her at every turn. Her beauty, personal struggles, and unconventional life have made her an enduring symbol of the complexities of royalty and the human desire for individuality and self-expression. Her life has inspired countless works of art, literature, and film, including the famous Sissi trilogy of movies starring Romy Schneider. These portrayals have romanticized Elizabeth's story, emphasizing her beauty and independence while glossing over the darker aspects of her life. Today, Elizabeth's memory is preserved in numerous monuments and museums, including the Sissi Museum at the Hofburg Palace in Vienna. Her life continues to fascinate as a story of a woman caught between the expectations of her position and her yearning for freedom, love, and meaning. Diane de Poitiers, born in 1499, was one of the most captivating and influential women of the French Renaissance, remembered for her remarkable beauty, intelligence, and powerful political role at the French court. Although she is often remembered as the mistress of King Henry II of France, her life and legacy extend far beyond her romantic relationship with the king. Diane's life story encompasses her early years, her rise to prominence, her long-standing influence at court, and her legacy in both French history and culture. Early life and background. Diane de Poitiers was born on January 3, 1499, in the Château de Saint-Vallier, located in the region of Dauphiné, in southeastern France. She was the daughter of Jean de Poitiers, Seigneur of Saint-Vallier, and Marguerite de Bataray. Her family was of noble descent, and she grew up in an environment that emphasized education and social graces, which would serve her well as she navigated the complexities of the royal court later in life. As a young woman, Diane was noted for her extraordinary beauty, which would later play a pivotal role in her influence at the French court. She was described as tall, with striking features, dark eyes, and a commanding presence that captured the attention of those around her. Her beauty was complemented by her intelligence, wit, and an air of dignified grace, traits that allowed her to move comfortably within the circles of the French nobility. Marriage to Louis de Brezé. In 1515, at the age of 16, Diane married Louis de Brezé, the Seigneur de Brezé and a senior official at the French court. Despite the considerable age gap, Louis was over 40 years her senior. The marriage was politically advantageous. Louis was an influential member of the French aristocracy, and Diane's marriage helped to solidify her status in the noble class. Together, Diane and Louis had 2 children, a son named François and a daughter named Louise. While Diane's marriage was primarily a political arrangement, she became a widow in 1531, when Louis died unexpectedly. His death left Diane a wealthy widow with significant estates. With her wealth and independent status, Diane was free to pursue her interests, including cultivating her relationship with the French royal family, a connection that would change the course of her life. Her relationship with King Henry II. In the early 1530s, Diane's life took a dramatic turn when she became the mistress of King Henry II of France, who was then the Dauphin, the heir to the throne. Diane's beauty and poise caught the attention of the young Henry, and they soon developed a deep and enduring relationship. Diane was 20 years older than Henry, but this age difference did not seem to hinder their connection. In fact, their bond was so strong that Diane remained his closest confidant throughout his life, even after he ascended to the throne in 1547. Henry's love for Diane was both public and intense. He showered her with lavish gifts, titles, and estates, making her one of the most powerful women in France. Diane was granted control over a large portion of the royal court's finances and had significant influence over the king's decisions, particularly in matters of state and foreign policy. She was widely regarded as the de facto ruler of France during Henry's reign, with a level of authority rarely seen for a mistress. Diane's relationship with Henry was not without its complications, particularly in relation to Catherine de' Medici, Henry's wife. Catherine, though initially content in her marriage, soon became deeply frustrated with her husband's infatuation with Diane, leading to tensions in the royal marriage. Diane, for her part, was always careful not to directly challenge Catherine's position as queen, but her influence was undeniable, and she continued to play a central role in the royal court. Political influence and court life. While Diane's relationship with Henry II was romantic, it was also deeply political. Diane was a skilled diplomat and advisor, and she played a crucial role in the political affairs of the kingdom. One of her most significant achievements was her influence over the French court's foreign policy. She was a supporter of the French monarchy's efforts to maintain a balance of power with Spain and the Holy Roman Empire, particularly during the turbulent years of the Italian Wars. Diane was also instrumental in Henry II's military campaigns, advising him on matters of strategy and diplomacy. She was a patron of the arts and a supporter of humanism, a movement that emphasized classical learning and intellectual exploration. Under her influence, the French court flourished as a center of culture, art, and scholarship. In addition to her political role, Diane's patronage extended to the development of several important architectural projects. She was particularly involved in the renovation and expansion of the Château de Chenonceau, a stunning French château located on the river Cher. The château became one of the most beautiful and iconic symbols of Diane's wealth and influence. The death of Henry II and decline of Diane's power. Diane's relationship with Henry II came to a tragic end in 1559, when Henry was mortally wounded in a jousting accident. Following his death, Diane lost much of her influence at court. Henry's widow, Catherine de' Medici, who had long been sidelined during Henry's reign, now asserted her power. Catherine stripped Diane of many of her titles and properties, including the Château de Chenonceau, which was taken from her and given to Catherine's daughter, Queen Marguerite of Valois. Despite these losses, Diane retained her dignity and continued to live in relative comfort, though she no longer had the same level of influence she had enjoyed during Henry's reign. She retreated to her estates, where she lived out her final years in seclusion. Death and legacy. Diane de Poitiers died on April 22, 1566, at the age of 67. Though she was no longer the dominant figure in French politics, her legacy as a powerful and influential woman of the Renaissance persisted. Diane's life has been the subject of fascination for historians and scholars, who have studied her role as a mistress, a diplomat, and a cultural patron. She remains a symbol of the complex relationships between power, love, and politics in the royal courts of Renaissance Europe. Her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of court intrigue, her political acumen, and her beauty all contributed to her lasting influence in French history. Diane de Poitiers' life is a testament to the agency that women could wield in even the most male-dominated eras. Her relationship with Henry II, though often seen through the lens of a mistress, was far more than that. It was a partnership based on mutual respect, shared ambition, and a deep emotional bond. Diane's legacy as one of the most powerful women in Renaissance France endures to this day. Mata Hari, born Margarita Geertruida Zell on August 7, 1876, in Leeuwarden, the Netherlands, is one of history's most enigmatic and infamous figures. Known for her exotic dancing and her alleged espionage activities during World War I, she remains a symbol of mystery and intrigue. Her life was filled with dramatic turns, ranging from a promising childhood to a scandalous career and eventual tragic demise, making her one of the most fascinating characters in modern history. Early life and marriage. Margarita Zell grew up in a relatively privileged middle-class family. Her father, Adam Zell, was a well-to-do hat merchant, but when she was young, her family fell into financial ruin. Her father abandoned the family, and her mother passed away when Margarita was just 15 years old. She was sent to live with relatives in Leiden, where she attended a girls' school and was raised in an environment of strict discipline. At the age of 18, Margarita left her aunt's home and joined the military as a way to escape her difficult circumstances. She responded to an advertisement placed by a Dutch colonial officer seeking a wife. In 1895, she married Captain Rudolph MacLeod, an officer in the Dutch East Indies Army. The marriage was troubled from the beginning. MacLeod was an alcoholic, and their relationship was marked by frequent infidelities and domestic violence. However, the marriage did lead to her relocation to the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia, where she lived for several years. In the East Indies, Margarita's life began to take a dramatic turn. She adopted the name Matahari, meaning Eye of the Day or Sun, a reference to the exotic and mysterious connotations of the East that fascinated the Western world. This name would later become synonymous with her persona as a seductive and elusive figure. During her time in the East Indies, Margarita suffered personal tragedies, including the death of her 2 children. Her marriage continued to deteriorate, and she eventually separated from her husband in 1902. Feeling isolated and disillusioned with her life in the East, she decided to return to Europe, beginning her transformation into the famous Matahari. Rise to fame. The Dance of Matahari. Matahari's return to Europe marked the beginning of her rise to fame. She arrived in Paris in 1903 and began a new life as a dancer, using her exotic name and persona. At the time, Paris was a hub of cultural experimentation, and the city was captivated by new and avant-garde forms of entertainment. Matahari quickly became a sensation, performing in salons, theaters, and cabarets across Europe. Her dances, inspired by what she claimed were ancient rituals from the East, were both provocative and captivating. She often performed wearing very little clothing, draped in sheer veils or decorated with jewels, and used suggestive movements that challenged the social norms of the time. Her performances played on Western fantasies of the Orient, an exotic, sensual, and mysterious land that was a source of intrigue and desire in European culture. Matahari's appeal was not just her physical beauty, but also the allure of the unknown that she represented. She became a celebrated figure in Parisian society, mingling with the elite, artists, writers, and politicians. Over time, she was considered one of the most famous dancers in Europe, earning both admiration and scorn for her audacity and sensuality. However, Matahari's career was not without its controversies. Her acts, which often blurred the lines between performance art and explicit sexual exhibitionism, were criticized by some for being indecent. Despite this, her fame grew, and she traveled widely, performing in cities such as London, Berlin, and Vienna, further cementing her place as a symbol of exoticism and eroticism in early 20th century Europe. Alleged espionage activities. It is at this point in her life that the most controversial chapter of Matahari's story begins, her alleged involvement in espionage. With the outbreak of World War I in 1914, Matahari found herself in a complex position. As a woman of great fame and influence, and a frequent traveler between European capitals, she was approached by both the French and German governments to act as a spy. The exact nature of her involvement in espionage is still a subject of debate, with some historians believing she was more of a scapegoat than a true spy, while others argue she was deeply entangled in espionage activities. Matahari's primary role in the conflict seems to have been that of a courtesan, moving between high-ranking officials in both Germany and France. She allegedly provided information to the Germans while simultaneously being recruited by the French. Her personal relationships with men in power, including diplomats, military officers, and aristocrats, put her in a unique position to gather sensitive information, whether consciously or unknowingly. Her travels, particularly her visits to Germany, and her ability to speak multiple languages may have made her a useful asset to both sides during the war. Mata Hari's espionage activities were brought to light when she was arrested by French authorities in 1917, during the height of World War I. The French military accused her of being a German spy who had passed information to the enemy, leading to the deaths of French soldiers on the front lines. However, the evidence against her was largely circumstantial. There were claims that she had been in contact with German officials, and some believed she had been a double agent, although there was little concrete proof to support these claims. Trial and execution. Mata Hari's trial began in 1917, and it became a highly publicized event. The French press portrayed her as the ultimate femme fatale, a seductive woman who had betrayed her country for personal gain. Her trial was marred by sensationalism, and she was widely vilified in the media. During the trial, Mata Hari denied all charges of espionage, insisting that she was innocent and had never intentionally worked against France. She claimed that she was simply a woman trying to survive in a world dominated by men, and that she had been used as a pawn in the larger political and military struggle. Despite her defense, Mata Hari was found guilty of espionage and sentenced to death. On October 15, 1917, she was executed by firing squad at the age of 41. Her death was met with a mix of public fascination and horror, and her trial has since been regarded as a symbol of the dangers of wartime paranoia and the scapegoating of women. Legacy and myth. Mata Hari's execution did not mark the end of her story. In the years following her death, she became a symbol of mystery, seduction, and betrayal. Her life and her trial have been the subject of numerous books, films, and documentaries. Over time, her image has been romanticized as that of a tragic and misunderstood woman, caught between her role as a courtesan and her alleged espionage activities. Her legacy is complicated, and historians continue to debate the extent of her involvement in espionage. Some argue that she was a true spy who betrayed her country for personal gain, while others suggest that she was simply a victim of circumstance, unfairly accused and executed by a war-hungry nation looking for a scapegoat. Regardless of the truth of her espionage activities, Mata Hari remains one of the most iconic women of the 20th century. She embodies the allure of the unknown, the dangers of female ambition, and the complexities of war and espionage. Her story continues to captivate the imagination, a testament to the power of myth, mystery, and the enduring fascination with the femme fatale. Marilyn Monroe, born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926, in Los Angeles, California, became one of the most iconic figures in the history of American entertainment. Her life was marked by a combination of immense success, personal struggles, and tragedy, leading her to become a symbol of beauty, vulnerability, and the darker side of fame. Despite her tragic end at the age of 36, Monroe's legacy continues to endure, influencing not only the entertainment industry but also shaping the cultural landscape of the 20th century. Early life and family struggles. Marilyn Monroe's early years were filled with instability. She was born to Gladys Pearl Baker, who worked in a variety of jobs and whose personal life was tumultuous. Monroe's father was absent, and her mother struggled with mental illness, leading to a deeply troubled childhood. As a result, Marilyn spent much of her early life in foster care, with various relatives and in orphanages. She was often moved from place to place, never having a permanent home or stable family life. Her mother's mental health problems only intensified over time, and in 1935, when Monroe was just 9 years old, Gladys was institutionalized, leaving Monroe with no immediate family. She was sent to live with several foster families, and in many ways these years contributed to the sense of loneliness and insecurity that would haunt Monroe throughout her life. As a teenager, she attended multiple schools, but the instability continued to shape her emotional development. The birth of Marilyn Monroe. In 1942, at the age of 16, Monroe married James Doherty, a factory worker she had met at a young age. The marriage was a way for Monroe to escape her foster homes, and it also provided her with a sense of stability. However, the marriage was short-lived. By 1946, Monroe was living in Los Angeles and pursuing a career in modeling and acting. Her marriage to Doherty ended in divorce in 1946, and it was during this time that she began to reinvent herself. Monroe's transition from a young woman with a troubled past to the glamorous movie star we recognize today began in earnest after her divorce. She changed her name to Marilyn Monroe, inspired by the actress Marilyn Miller and the family name of her mother. Her looks were striking: platinum blonde hair, full lips, and an hourglass figure that would become her trademark. She began to work as a model, appearing in ads and magazine covers. Her beauty soon caught the eye of Hollywood talent scouts, and in 1946, she signed a contract with 20th Century Fox. Hollywood breakthrough. Monroe's rise to fame was not immediate. At first, she struggled to be taken seriously as an actress. Fox initially saw her as a model rather than a talented performer, but her screen tests impressed the studio, and she was cast in minor roles in films like The Shocking Miss Pilgrim, 1947, and Scudda Who? Scudda Hey, 1947. While these films were not successful, they marked the beginning of her career in Hollywood. In 1950, Monroe's breakthrough came when she was cast in the film All About Eve, 1950. Though her role was small, it showcased her natural talent and undeniable presence, and she was soon offered more substantial roles. Her career took off in 1953, with her performances in Niagara, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire, cementing her status as a major star. Her platinum blonde hair, sultry voice, and playful yet vulnerable persona quickly became iconic, and Monroe became the quintessential blonde bombshell of the 1950s. Despite her early roles being mostly centered on her physical beauty, Monroe began to prove her versatility as an actress. She received praise for her comedic timing and ability to deliver both lighthearted and dramatic performances. Films like The 7-Year Itch, 1955, with the famous scene of Monroe standing over a subway grate, reinforced her status as a sex symbol, while her performances in Bus Stop, 1956, and The Prince and the Showgirl, 1957, showed her talent as a serious actress. Personal struggles and marriages. Behind the camera, however, Monroe's life was anything but glamorous. While she was adored by the public, she struggled with personal demons, including bouts of depression, anxiety, and insecurity. Monroe's personal life was filled with turbulent relationships, including 2 high-profile marriages. Her first marriage to James Doherty ended in divorce, but her second marriage to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio in 1954 was one of the most publicized unions of the 20th century. The marriage lasted only 9 months, and while the couple had an intense and passionate relationship, it was marked by emotional distance and DiMaggio's jealousy of Monroe's fame. They divorced in 1954, and Monroe's third marriage, to playwright Arthur Miller, also ended in divorce in 1961. Miller and Monroe's marriage was strained by her emotional fragility and her increasing reliance on medication and alcohol. Throughout her life, Monroe was often described as lonely, insecure, and emotionally vulnerable, and these issues complicated both her personal relationships and her career. Monroe's marriages were only a small part of the larger story of her emotional struggles. She sought solace in a series of therapists and often spoke publicly about her battles with mental health. Her dependence on prescription pills and alcohol worsened in the 1960s, as did her difficulties on set. Despite her problems, her talent and beauty continued to captivate audiences around the world. The final years. By 1962, Marilyn Monroe's life had become increasingly chaotic. She was no longer the vibrant young starlet she had once been, and her personal struggles were becoming harder to ignore. Her mental health issues, combined with the pressures of her career, led to a series of erratic behavior, including several incidents on film sets where she was late, unreliable, or unprofessional. Despite this, she was still one of the most famous women in the world, and had signed a contract to star in the film Something's Got to Give. On August 5, 1962, at the age of 36, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Los Angeles home from a probable overdose of barbiturates. Her death was ruled as a probable suicide, but the circumstances surrounding her passing remain a subject of speculation and controversy. Monroe's death marked the tragic end of a life filled with both incredible achievement and deep personal pain. Legacy. Marilyn Monroe's legacy endures to this day. She remains one of the most iconic figures in Hollywood history, a symbol of beauty, vulnerability, and the price of fame. Despite her personal struggles, her films and image have left an indelible mark on popular culture. Monroe is still remembered as a feminist icon, not only for her roles as a woman who embraced her sexuality, but also for her efforts to control her career and image at a time when women in Hollywood had little power. Her influence has extended far beyond the silver screen, with her image being used in art, fashion, and advertising. Photographers such as Richard Avedon, Bert Stern, and George Barris immortalized her in some of the most famous portraits ever taken, and she continues to be a muse for artists, filmmakers, and designers. Marilyn Monroe's life, full of contradictions and complexities, serves as a reminder of both the rewards and the cost of fame. While she was a symbol of success and beauty, she also struggled with loneliness and a sense of personal inadequacy, which resonated deeply with many people. Today, Monroe is remembered not only as a sex symbol, but also as a tragic figure whose story reflects the tension between public adoration and private pain, and her legacy continues to fascinate generations. Lola Montez, 1821 to 1861, born Maria Dolores Eliza Rosanna Gilbert, was an iconic and controversial figure of the 19th century. Known for her beauty, boldness, and captivating performances, she rose to fame as a dancer, actress, and mistress of King Ludwig I of Bavaria. However, her life was marked by scandal, defiance of societal norms, and a relentless pursuit of independence. Montez's life and legacy continue to intrigue historians and enthusiasts, not just for her colorful career, but also for the way in which she challenged traditional gender roles and societal expectations of women in her time. Early life and background. Lola Montez was born on February 17, 1821, in Limerick, Ireland, as Maria Dolores Eliza Rosanna Gilbert. She was the illegitimate daughter of an Anglo-Irish army officer, Edward Gilbert, and an unknown woman, though some sources suggest that her mother may have been of Spanish descent, possibly giving Lola her exotic appeal. She spent her early years in Ireland before moving with her mother to London, where she experienced a difficult and unstable childhood. After her father's death, her mother married again and the family moved around, experiencing financial struggles. By the age of 15, Lola was already separated from her mother, having been placed in the care of relatives. Throughout her youth, Lola's rebellious spirit and determination to escape her impoverished circumstances became evident. She had a strong desire for fame and fortune, and, like many young women of her time, she sought ways to rise above her humble beginnings. She lived in London and Paris for a time, where she became known for her beauty and social charms, but it was her move to Spain that would mark the beginning of her journey into the spotlight. The dance career and the rise to fame. In her late teens, Lola moved to Spain, where she began performing as a dancer under the name Lola Montez. Her performances, which combined sensuality with a theatrical flair, captivated European audiences. Initially, she was not well received, but her tenacity and determination allowed her to develop a distinctive style that would eventually make her famous. In Madrid, she performed for the aristocracy and became a sensation on the Spanish stage. Her dances were often described as provocative, involving erotic movements that scandalized conservative society. Montez's time in Spain was also marked by her association with powerful men, including a number of influential lovers. Her relationships were often the subject of gossip, adding to her reputation as a woman who defied the norms of Victorian propriety. However, it was her time in Paris that would truly cement her legacy as a public figure, as she became part of the vibrant artistic and intellectual circles of the city. In Paris, Lola's dancing became increasingly popular, and she started performing at some of the most prestigious venues. She became famous for her spider dance, a daring and sensational act that involved dramatic and sensual movements. Her performances were considered scandalous, as they pushed the boundaries of acceptable public behavior for women at the time. The dancer's reputation spread across Europe, and she soon attracted the attention of the royal courts and other elites. The affair with King Ludwig I of Bavaria. Lola Montese's most famous and most scandalous relationship was with King Ludwig I of Bavaria. In the late 1840s, Lola arrived in Munich, where her beauty, wit, and allure captured the attention of the king. Ludwig was a passionate admirer of the arts, and he became infatuated with Montez. Their affair began in 1846, and it quickly became one of the most public and controversial relationships in Europe. Ludwig, who was already married, took Lola as his mistress, showering her with gifts, privileges, and an influence that was unprecedented for a woman of her background. Lola's relationship with Ludwig led to a series of political and social upheavals in Bavaria. She was granted the title of Countess of Landsfeld and became a close advisor to the king. However, her influence over Ludwig and her controversial presence at court created significant unrest among the Bavarian nobility and political elite. She was accused of manipulating the king for her own gain, and her influence was seen as a destabilizing force in the kingdom. Her affair with Ludwig sparked widespread criticism from both the German court and the general public. As a foreigner and a woman with no noble lineage, her rise to power was seen as a direct challenge to the established order. Her critics accused her of undermining the monarchy, and many blamed her for the king's decision to make unpopular political reforms. In 1848, as revolutionary uprisings swept across Europe, the unrest in Bavaria reached a boiling point. King Ludwig's position was severely weakened, and Lola's influence was cited as one of the key factors leading to his abdication. The king, facing immense pressure from his ministers and the public, was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Maximilian II. Lola Montez, by this time a highly controversial figure, fled the country amid growing hostility. Life after Bavaria. Following her departure from Bavaria, Lola Montez continued to live a life marked by adventure and scandal. She traveled extensively through Europe, America, and Australia, seeking new opportunities to support herself. In each place she went, she would perform her dances and engage in romantic entanglements with powerful men. Her career as a dancer, however, had a limited shelf life. As she grew older, her fame began to wane, and she struggled to maintain the lifestyle to which she had grown accustomed. In the United States, Lola sought to reinvent herself, giving lectures and performing in plays. She spent time in New York and in California, where she became involved in the political scene, briefly even entering into a marriage with a California banker, Thomas James, in 1851. However, this marriage was short-lived, and by the early 1850s, Lola's financial and personal stability continued to deteriorate. Despite her declining fortunes, she was determined to remain in the public eye. In 1855, she toured Australia and New Zealand, where she performed to large crowds and even gained some notoriety as a writer, publishing her autobiography. While she had once been a symbol of defiance and sexual liberation, by the late 1850s, she had become more of a cautionary tale, a fallen woman who had lived beyond the norms of her time. Death and legacy. Lola Montez's health began to deteriorate rapidly in the late 1850s, likely due to her tumultuous lifestyle. She suffered from chronic illnesses, and by 1861 she was severely ill. On January 17, 1861, she died of pneumonia in the small town of New York, at the age of 39. Her death marked the end of a life full of drama, scandal, and rebellion. Lola Montez's legacy has remained controversial but fascinating. She was a woman who challenged the conventions of her time and lived her life on her own terms. Her boldness, charisma, and ability to manipulate the powerful men around her made her a symbol of feminine strength and agency, albeit one that was often seen through a lens of scandal and moral judgment. Despite the controversies that surrounded her, she made an indelible mark on history, particularly in terms of her role in the cultural and political life of 19th-century Europe. In modern times, Lola Montez is often remembered as a feminist icon, a woman who unapologetically defied the rigid gender roles of her era. Her life story, full of risk, adventure, and defiance, continues to captivate those who seek to understand the complexities of power, fame, and gender in a rapidly changing world. Audrey Hepburn, 1929 to 1993, was one of the most beloved and influential actresses in the history of cinema. Known for her elegance, grace, and timeless beauty, she became a global icon whose impact extended far beyond her acting career. Hepburn's life story is one of resilience, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to humanitarian causes, making her not only a celebrated figure in film, but also a symbol of kindness and charity. Early life and background. Audrey Hepburn was born on May 4, 1929, in Brussels, Belgium, to a Dutch baroness, Ella van Heemstra, and a British father, Joseph Victor Anthony Rustin. Her parents' marriage was troubled, and they separated when she was young. Hepburn's early years were spent in Belgium, and later in the Netherlands, where she lived through the hardships of World War II. During the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands, Hepburn's family faced immense challenges. The war left a deep impression on her. As a young girl, she witnessed the brutality of the occupying forces and suffered from malnutrition, which led to lasting health problems. She was also part of the Dutch resistance movement, helping to support the Allied forces by delivering messages and performing small acts of defiance. Despite the adversity she faced, Hepburn's love for the arts, especially ballet, flourished during this time. She developed a passion for dancing and began taking ballet lessons at an early age. Her dedication to dance helped her develop the poise and elegance that would later define her screen presence. Transition to acting. After the war, Hepburn moved to London, where she studied ballet at the London Ballet School and later at the prestigious Ballet Rambert. She had aspirations of becoming a professional dancer, but a growth spurt and related health issues, particularly an ankle injury, ended her ballet career prematurely. However, this setback led her to pursue acting, which would ultimately define her career. In the late 1940s, Hepburn began appearing in British films and stage productions. She initially gained recognition for her work in the theater, but it was her role in the Broadway production of Gigi in 1951 that caught the attention of Hollywood. It was also during this period that she adopted the name Audrey Hepburn, as her birth name, Audrey Kathleen Rustin, was considered less glamorous. Breakthrough role: Roman Holiday, 1953. Hepburn's big break came in 1953 when she was cast as Princess Anne in the film Roman Holiday, directed by William Wyler. The film, which also starred Gregory Peck, was a critical and commercial success and earned Hepburn an Academy Award for Best Actress. In the role, she played a young princess who escapes her royal duties to experience life as a commoner in Rome. Hepburn's portrayal of Princess Anne was both charming and relatable, capturing the innocence and longing for freedom that resonated with audiences worldwide. The success of Roman Holiday catapulted Hepburn to international stardom. It established her as one of the leading actresses of her time and made her a household name. Hepburn's combination of beauty, elegance, and warmth quickly set her apart from other actresses, and she became known as the girl next door with an extraordinary grace. Hollywood stardom. Following the success of Roman Holiday, Hepburn continued to work in Hollywood, starring in a string of successful films. Her roles in movies like Sabrina, 1954, The Nun's Story, 1959, Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1961, and My Fair Lady, 1964, further solidified her status as a cinematic icon. In Sabrina, Hepburn played the role of a young woman from a modest background who is transformed by love and glamour. Her performance, alongside Humphrey Bogart and William Holden, earned her another nomination for an Academy Award. The film was a commercial success, and Hepburn's portrayal of the sweet, naive Sabrina became one of her most beloved roles. Perhaps her most iconic film role came in 1961, with Breakfast at Tiffany's, based on Truman Capote's novella. In this film, Hepburn portrayed Holly Golightly, a quirky and enigmatic socialite who spends her days in New York City's upscale shops and nightclubs. Holly's signature, black dress, pearl necklace, and hairstyle became a defining fashion moment of the 20th century. Hepburn's portrayal of Holly, a woman searching for love and self-identity, was a departure from her previous roles, showcasing her versatility as an actress. Another major achievement came with My Fair Lady, 1964, in which Hepburn played Eliza Doolittle, a poor flower girl transformed into a proper lady by a linguistics professor, played by Rex Harrison. Although Hepburn's vocal performances were dubbed by singer Marni Nixon, her performance in the film was widely praised. My Fair Lady became one of the highest-grossing films of the decade and earned Hepburn multiple awards. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Hepburn became known for her roles in romantic comedies and dramas, often playing strong yet vulnerable women. Her on-screen persona was characterized by her elegance, sophistication, and understated charm, qualities that endeared her to audiences and earned her a lasting place in Hollywood history. Personal life. While Audrey Hepburn's professional life was flourishing, her personal life was more tumultuous. She married actor Mel Ferrer in 1954, and the couple had a son, Sean Hepburn Ferrer, in 1960. However, their marriage ended in divorce in 1968. Hepburn's second marriage, to Andrea Dotti, an Italian psychiatrist, in 1969, also ended in divorce in 1982. She had another son, Luca Dotti, with Andrea. Despite the challenges in her personal life, Hepburn remained dedicated to her family and her charitable work. In the 1980s, she became involved with UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, using her fame to advocate for children in need. Hepburn traveled extensively to war-torn regions and impoverished areas to raise awareness about the plight of children. She visited countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, where she saw firsthand the devastating effects of poverty and disease on children. Hepburn's humanitarian work earned her numerous accolades, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom, awarded to her posthumously in 1993. Later years and legacy. In the 1970s and 1980s, Hepburn shifted her focus from acting to her humanitarian work, though she did continue to appear in films occasionally. Some of her later films included Robin and Marian, 1976, They All Laughed, 1981, and Always, 1989, directed by Steven Spielberg. While her acting career had slowed, Hepburn's humanitarian efforts were taking center stage. In the final years of her life, Hepburn battled cancer. She passed away on January 20, 1993, at the age of 63. Her death was a great loss to the world, but her legacy lived on through the millions of lives she touched, both as an actress and as a philanthropist. Audrey Hepburn's legacy is enduring. She is remembered not only as one of the most iconic actresses of the 20th century, but also as a symbol of grace, compassion, and inner strength. Her timeless fashion choices, particularly the little black dress she wore in Breakfast at Tiffany's, continue to inspire designers and fashion enthusiasts around the world. Hepburn's humanitarian work remains an integral part of her legacy, as her commitment to children and her advocacy for their rights made a lasting impact on UNICEF's work. Audrey Hepburn's life is a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of kindness, and the timeless appeal of elegance and grace. Cleopatra VII, one of history's most iconic figures, was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. Born in 69 BCE in Alexandria, Cleopatra was the daughter of Ptolemy XII, Auletes, and part of a dynasty founded by Ptolemy I, a general of Alexander the Great. Her life was a tapestry of political intrigue, ambition, love, and resilience, which has captivated historians and storytellers for centuries. Early life and ascension to power. Cleopatra grew up in the opulent and culturally rich environment of Alexandria, a hub of knowledge and commerce. She was highly educated, fluent in several languages, including Greek, Egyptian, and possibly others, and deeply versed in philosophy, astronomy, and politics. Unlike her Ptolemaic predecessors, Cleopatra embraced Egyptian culture, even adopting the title of pharaoh and presenting herself as the reincarnation of the goddess Isis. This connection to native Egyptian traditions distinguished her from her largely Greek Macedonian lineage. In 51 BCE, Cleopatra ascended the throne alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, following the death of their father. According to custom, Cleopatra married Ptolemy XIII, as Ptolemaic rulers often practiced sibling marriage to consolidate power. However, the siblings' co-rule was fraught with tension. Cleopatra, ambitious and intelligent, sought to wield sole authority, leading to a power struggle that culminated in her temporary exile in 48 BCE. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. Cleopatra's fortunes changed with the arrival of Julius Caesar in Alexandria. The Roman general had come to Egypt in pursuit of Pompey, his rival in the Roman Civil War, who had been assassinated upon his arrival in Egypt. Cleopatra seized the opportunity to align with Caesar, famously smuggling herself into his presence, rolled in a carpet, or sack, according to some accounts. Her boldness and charm reportedly won him over. Caesar supported Cleopatra's claim to the throne, helping her depose Ptolemy XIII after a siege of Alexandria. The conflict ended with Ptolemy's death, and Cleopatra was reinstated as queen, this time co-ruling with another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, whom she also married. Cleopatra and Caesar became lovers and had a son, Ptolemy XV, better known as Caesarion. She accompanied Caesar to Rome in 46 BCE, where her presence caused a sensation and scandal, as he was already married. Cleopatra's sojourn in Rome ended abruptly after Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, prompting her return to Egypt. Cleopatra and Mark Antony. After Caesar's death, Rome descended into political chaos. Cleopatra aligned herself with Mark Antony, one of the triumvirs who divided control of the Roman Republic. Their relationship began as a political alliance but quickly developed into a passionate love affair. Cleopatra provided Antony with financial and military support, while Antony recognized her sovereignty over Egypt and neighboring territories. The couple's relationship produced 3 children, twins Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, and a younger son, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Their union symbolized the fusion of Eastern and Western power, but it also alarmed Rome. Antony's rival, Octavian, later Augustus Caesar, used the affair to undermine Antony, portraying Cleopatra as a manipulative seductress who sought to dominate Rome. The Battle of Actium and Cleopatra's downfall. The conflict between Octavian and Antony came to a head in 31 BCE at the naval Battle of Actium. Cleopatra and Antony's forces were decisively defeated, and the couple retreated to Alexandria. With Octavian closing in, their situation grew increasingly desperate. In 30 BCE, Octavian invaded Egypt. Antony, mistakenly believing Cleopatra had died, fell on his sword. Mortally wounded, he was brought to Cleopatra and died in her arms. Cleopatra, now a prisoner of Octavian, refused to be paraded through Rome as a trophy of war. According to legend, she arranged her death by allowing an asp, a venomous snake, to bite her, though the exact method remains uncertain. Cleopatra died on August 12, 30th BCE, at the age of 39. Legacy. Cleopatra's death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and Egypt's independence, as the country became a province of the Roman Empire. Her life and reign have been the subject of fascination, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and drama. Historians debate her true character, with Roman sources often depicting her as a cunning and seductive femme fatale, while modern scholars emphasize her intelligence, political acumen, and leadership. Cleopatra's enduring legacy lies in her ability to navigate a male-dominated world with resourcefulness and determination. She was a shrewd politician who skillfully balanced alliances, cultivated loyalty, and preserved Egypt's wealth and influence for as long as possible. Her story, intertwined with the grandeur and tragedy of ancient history, continues to captivate and inspire. Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy, often called the face that launched 1,000 ships, is one of the most captivating figures in Greek mythology. As the central figure in the story of the Trojan War, her beauty and fate have been immortalized in literature, art, and culture for centuries. Although her existence is steeped in myth, her story reveals much about the ancient Greek worldview, their values, and the power of storytelling. Origins and divine heritage. Helen was said to be the daughter of Zeus, the king of the gods, and Leda, the queen of Sparta. Her birth is surrounded by mythical intrigue. According to one version of the myth, Zeus seduced or approached Leda in the form of a swan. From this union, Leda laid an egg from which Helen emerged. This divine origin bestowed Helen with extraordinary beauty, making her a subject of admiration and desire from an early age. Helen was also the sister of Castor, Pollux, and Clytemnestra. Together, they formed a family often intertwined with significant events in Greek mythology. As a demigoddess, Helen's beauty was unparalleled, and she was often seen as a symbol of divine perfection and mortal consequence. The suitors and marriage to Menelaus. As Helen grew, her beauty attracted countless suitors from across Greece, all eager to win her hand in marriage. To prevent conflict among them, her mortal father, Tyndareus, sought the counsel of Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca. Odysseus proposed an oath, later known as the Oath of Tyndareus, whereby all the suitors would pledge to support and defend Helen's chosen husband, regardless of who he might be. Helen ultimately married Menelaus, a relatively lesser-known suitor who became the king of Sparta. Their union seemed stable, and they had a daughter named Hermione. However, Helen's destiny was far from peaceful, as divine forces and human ambition would soon intervene. The abduction by Paris. The catalyst for the Trojan War began when Paris, a prince of Troy, arrived in Sparta. According to myth, Paris had been promised the love of the most beautiful woman in the world by the goddess Aphrodite after he awarded her the golden apple in a contest among the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. This contest, known as the Judgment of Paris, set the stage for Helen's abduction. While visiting Sparta as a guest of Menelaus, Paris either seduced or abducted Helen, depending on the version of the myth. Some accounts suggest Helen left willingly, enchanted by Paris's charm and beauty. Others portray her as a victim, forcibly taken to Troy. Regardless of the circumstances, her departure caused outrage and ignited the famous war. The Trojan War. Menelaus, humiliated and enraged by Helen's departure, called upon the former suitors who had sworn the oath of Tyndareus. Under the leadership of Agamemnon, Menelaus's brother, the Greek forces assembled a massive army and fleet to retrieve Helen and punish Troy. The conflict that ensued became one of the central narratives of Greek mythology, immortalized in Homer's Iliad. Helen's role during the Trojan War is depicted in varying ways, depending on the source. Some portray her as a remorseful figure, longing to return to Sparta and lamenting the destruction caused by her beauty. Others depict her as complicit, enjoying her life in Troy and remaining loyal to Paris. In the Iliad, Helen expresses guilt and sorrow for the war, particularly during her interactions with Hector, Paris's brother, and other Trojan leaders. Despite her role as the cause of the war, Helen's actions during the 10-year conflict remain relatively passive in most accounts. Her beauty continues to mesmerize those around her, and she becomes a symbolic prize fought over by both sides. The Fall of Troy. The war culminated in the famous tale of the Trojan horse, a cunning stratagem devised by Odysseus. The Greeks pretended to retreat, leaving behind a giant wooden horse filled with soldiers. The Trojans brought the horse into the city, believing it was a peace offering, only to be ambushed during the night. Troy was sacked and its leaders killed or enslaved. Helen's fate during the fall of Troy is another point of divergence in mythological accounts. Some stories claim that Menelaus intended to kill her for her betrayal, but was overcome by her beauty and forgave her instead. Others suggest that Helen played a role in the downfall of Troy, helping the Greeks by signaling or aiding their entry into the city. Return to Sparta and later life. After the war, Helen returned to Sparta with Menelaus. Their reunion is often portrayed as tense, with Menelaus struggling to reconcile his feelings of love and betrayal. Nevertheless, Helen resumed her role as Queen of Sparta, and the couple seemingly lived out the rest of their days in relative peace. In later myths and plays, Helen's character is revisited in various ways. Euripides, in his play Helen, presents an alternative version of the story where Helen never went to Troy at all. Instead, a phantom created by the gods took her place, and the real Helen remained in Egypt. This version absolves Helen of blame for the war and emphasizes her victimhood in a divine scheme. Legacy and symbolism. Helen of Troy's legacy extends far beyond the bounds of mythology. She has been interpreted as a symbol of beauty, power, and the destructive potential of desire. Her story has inspired countless works of literature, including Homer's Iliad, Euripides' Helen, and various modern retellings. Artists across centuries have painted and sculpted Helen as the epitome of idealized beauty. At the same time, Helen represents the complexities of human nature. She embodies both victimhood and agency, loyalty and betrayal, love and conflict. Her story highlights the role of women in Greek mythology as both revered and blamed for the actions of men. Through Helen, the ancient Greeks explored themes of fate, divine intervention, and the consequences of human ambition. Conclusion: Helen of Troy remains one of the most enduring figures in mythology, a testament to the power of storytelling and the timeless allure of beauty and tragedy. Whether viewed as a pawn of the gods, a seductress, or a remorseful queen, Helen's story captures the imagination and continues to inspire debate and interpretation. Her life, as told through myth, reminds us of the fragile balance between admiration and envy, love and war, and the human desire to immortalize what is most fleeting, beauty. Helen of Troy, often called the face that launched 1,000 ships, is one of the most captivating figures in Greek mythology. As the central figure in the story of the Trojan War, her beauty and fate have been immortalized in literature, art, and culture for centuries. Although her existence is steeped in myth, her story reveals much about the ancient Greek worldview, their values, and the power of storytelling. Origins and divine heritage. Helen was said to be the daughter of Zeus, the king of the gods, and Leda, the queen of Sparta. Her birth is surrounded by mythical intrigue. According to one version of the myth, Zeus seduced or approached Leda in the form of a swan. From this union, Leda laid an egg from which Helen emerged. This divine origin bestowed Helen with extraordinary beauty, making her a subject of admiration and desire from an early age. Helen was also the sister of Castor, Pollux, and Clytemnestra. Together, they formed a family often intertwined with significant events in Greek mythology. As a demigoddess, Helen's beauty was unparalleled, and she was often seen as a symbol of divine perfection and mortal consequence. The suitors and marriage to Menelaus. As Helen grew, her beauty attracted countless suitors from across Greece, all eager to win her hand in marriage. To prevent conflict among them, her mortal father, Tyndareus, sought the counsel of Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca. Odysseus proposed an oath, later known as the Oath of Tyndareus, whereby all the suitors would pledge to support and defend Helen's chosen husband, regardless of who he might be. Helen ultimately married Menelaus, a relatively lesser-known suitor who became the king of Sparta. Their union seemed stable, and they had a daughter named Hermione. However, Helen's destiny was far from peaceful, as divine forces and human ambition would soon intervene. The abduction by Paris. The catalyst for the Trojan War began when Paris, a prince of Troy, arrived in Sparta. According to myth, Paris had been promised the love of the most beautiful woman in the world by the goddess Aphrodite after he awarded her the golden apple in a contest among the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. This contest, known as the Judgment of Paris, set the stage for Helen's abduction. While visiting Sparta as a guest of Menelaus, Paris either seduced or abducted Helen, depending on the version of the myth. Some accounts suggest Helen left willingly, enchanted by Paris's charm and beauty. Others portray her as a victim, forcibly taken to Troy. Regardless of the circumstances, her departure caused outrage and ignited the famous war. The Trojan War. Menelaus, humiliated and enraged by Helen's departure, called upon the former suitors who had sworn the oath of Tyndareus. Under the leadership of Agamemnon, Menelaus's brother, the Greek forces assembled a massive army and fleet to retrieve Helen and punish Troy. The conflict that ensued became one of the central narratives of Greek mythology, immortalized in Homer's Iliad. Helen's role during the Trojan War is depicted in varying ways, depending on the source. Some portray her as a remorseful figure, longing to return to Sparta and lamenting the destruction caused by her beauty. Others depict her as complicit, enjoying her life in Troy and remaining loyal to Paris. In the Iliad, Helen expresses guilt and sorrow for the war, particularly during her interactions with Hector, Paris's brother, and other Trojan leaders. Despite her role as the cause of the war, Helen's actions during the 10-year conflict remain relatively passive in most accounts. Her beauty continues to mesmerize those around her, and she becomes a symbolic prize fought over by both sides. The Fall of Troy. The war culminated in the famous tale of the Trojan horse, a cunning stratagem devised by Odysseus. The Greeks pretended to retreat, leaving behind a giant wooden horse filled with soldiers. The Trojans brought the horse into the city, believing it was a peace offering, only to be ambushed during the night. Troy was sacked and its leaders killed or enslaved. Helen's fate during the fall of Troy is another point of divergence in mythological accounts. Some stories claim that Menelaus intended to kill her for her betrayal, but was overcome by her beauty and forgave her instead. Others suggest that Helen played a role in the downfall of Troy, helping the Greeks by signaling or aiding their entry into the city. Return to Sparta and later life. After the war, Helen returned to Sparta with Menelaus. Their reunion is often portrayed as tense, with Menelaus struggling to reconcile his feelings of love and betrayal. Nevertheless, Helen resumed her role as Queen of Sparta, and the couple seemingly lived out the rest of their days in relative peace. In later myths and plays, Helen's character is revisited in various ways. Euripides, in his play Helen, presents an alternative version of the story where Helen never went to Troy at all. Instead, a phantom created by the gods took her place, and the real Helen remained in Egypt. This version absolves Helen of blame for the war and emphasizes her victimhood in a divine scheme. Legacy and symbolism. Helen of Troy's legacy extends far beyond the bounds of mythology. She has been interpreted as a symbol of beauty, power, and the destructive potential of desire. Her story has inspired countless works of literature, including Homer's Iliad, Euripides' Helen, and various modern retellings. Artists across centuries have painted and sculpted Helen as the epitome of idealized beauty. At the same time, Helen represents the complexities of human nature. She embodies both victimhood and agency, loyalty and betrayal, love and conflict. Her story highlights the role of women in Greek mythology as both revered and blamed for the actions of men. Through Helen, the ancient Greeks explored themes of fate, divine intervention, and the consequences of human ambition. Conclusion: Helen of Troy remains one of the most enduring figures in mythology, a testament to the power of storytelling and the timeless allure of beauty and tragedy. Whether viewed as a pawn of the gods, a seductress, or a remorseful queen, Helen's story captures the imagination and continues to inspire debate and interpretation. Her life, as told through myth, reminds us of the fragile balance between admiration and envy, love and war, and the human desire to immortalize what is most fleeting: beauty.